October 26, 1942, the South Pacific, somewhere north of the Santa Cruz Islands. A carrier sits wounded in the water, her flight deck torn open. Smoke pouring from 2 direct bomb hits, a destroyer alongside fighting to keep her afloat. Aboard the Japanese flagship, Admiral Nagumo receives the report he's been waiting for. The American carrier is finished. His pilots confirm it. Intelligence confirms it. Radio Tokyo will broadcast the news within hours. The USS Enterprise has been sunk. Except she hasn't. 72 hours later, the Enterprise is back on the battle line. Flight deck patched, guns loaded, planes launching, and somewhere in the Japanese high command, men are staring at reconnaissance photos of a carrier that should be sitting on the ocean floor. This won't be the last time. The Japanese will report sinking the Enterprise 3 separate times during the war. 3 times they'll celebrate. 3 times they'll update their kill boards. And 3 times they'll watch her reappear on the horizon like something that refuses to die. They'll give her a name for it: the Gray Ghost. This is the story of the most decorated warship in United States Navy history. 20 battle stars, nearly every major engagement in the Pacific, more combat action than any aircraft carrier that has ever sailed. But to understand why the Enterprise became unkillable, you have to go back to a time when she was just another hull in the water. And the Navy wasn't even sure aircraft carriers were worth building. Newport News Shipbuilding, Virginia. Workers are laying the keel of a new vessel, hull number CV-6. She's a Yorktown-class carrier, the 6th aircraft carrier the United States Navy has ever commissioned. And in 1934, that designation doesn't carry the weight you might think. Carriers in the 1930s are the Navy's afterthought. The battleship admirals run the show. Men who grew up studying Jutland and Tsushima. Men who believe that wars at sea are won by armored hulls and massive guns firing broadside at 15 miles. Carriers to them are floating airstrips. Useful for scouting, maybe, but not for fighting. Not for winning. The numbers seem to prove them right. A battleship carries armor plate over a foot thick. A carrier's flight deck is thin enough that a bomb doesn't even need to be that big to punch straight through it. A battleship can absorb punishment that would send a carrier to the bottom in minutes. So when CV-6 slides into the water on October 3, 1936, christened Enterprise by the Secretary of the Navy's wife, she enters a fleet that doesn't quite know what to do with her. She's 809 feet long. She carries roughly 90 aircraft. She can make 32 knots, fast enough to outrun most of the surface fleet. But she's fragile. No thick belt armor, no 16-inch guns. If a battleship catches her, she's dead. If bombers find her without fighter cover, she's dead. The entire value proposition of an aircraft carrier in 1936 rests on a single, unproven theory: that her planes can strike an enemy fleet before that fleet gets close enough to strike her. It's a theory, nothing more. No one has ever tested it in a real war. The Enterprise will get that chance sooner than anyone expects. December 7th, 1941. The Enterprise is 200 miles west of Pearl Harbor, returning from a mission to deliver fighter planes to Wake Island. She was supposed to be in port. A storm delayed her. That storm saved her life. When the Japanese strike force hits Pearl Harbor that morning, the Enterprise's air group is already inbound, flying ahead of the carrier toward Ford Island. They arrive in the middle of the attack. American planes with no warning, flying straight into a sky full of Japanese Zeros and friendly anti-aircraft fire from gunners below who are shooting at anything with wings. 6 Enterprise aviators die in the first hours of the war. Not in a planned battle, not in a heroic charge. They die in confusion, caught between an enemy they didn't know was there and friendly guns that couldn't tell them apart from the attackers. Admiral William Bull Halsey is aboard the Enterprise that morning. When the reports reach him, the battleship's burning, the airfields destroyed, the Pacific Fleet crippled at its moorings, he gives an order that captures the mood of the entire ship. Before we're through with them, the Japanese language will be spoken only in hell. It's the kind of line that sounds like bravado, but standing on the bridge of the Enterprise on December 7th, 1941, it's something else. It's a promise made with almost nothing to back it up. The Pacific Fleet's battleship line is wrecked. The Enterprise and her sister carriers are now the most powerful surface combatants the United States has left in the Pacific Ocean. Not because carriers have proven themselves, because everything else is gone. The first months of 1942 are desperate. Japan is sweeping across the Pacific, the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, island after island falling. The Enterprise is one of the only tools the Navy has to strike back, and Halsey uses her like a fist. February 1st, 1942. The Enterprise raids the Marshall Islands, the first American carrier offensive of the war. Her planes hit Japanese positions on Kwajalein, Wacha, and Malolap. The damage is modest. The message isn't. The U.S. Navy is still fighting. She hits Wake Island. She hits Marcus Island, just 1,000 miles from Tokyo, close enough to make the Japanese understand that their homeland isn't untouchable. These aren't decisive battles. They're jabs. Probing strikes designed to keep the Japanese off balance while the United States figures out how to fight a carrier war it never planned for. But every raid teaches the Enterprise's crew something. How to launch strikes at dawn. How to recover planes in rough seas. How to coordinate fighters and dive bombers and torpedo planes into something resembling a coherent attack. The Enterprise is learning to fight, and she's about to face the exam. June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor. Japanese Admiral Yamamoto assembles the largest naval force Japan has ever deployed. 4 fleet carriers, hundreds of aircraft, battleships, cruisers, and an invasion force aimed at Midway Atoll. The plan is elegant. Take Midway, draw out what's left of the American carrier fleet, destroy it, end the war in the Pacific in one decisive engagement. Yamamoto has 4 fleet carriers, the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, the Hiryu. These are the same carriers that hit Pearl Harbor. Their air groups are the most experienced in the world. Their pilots have been fighting and winning since China. The Americans have 3 carriers to oppose them. The Yorktown, freshly patched together after taking a bomb at the Battle of the Coral Sea, repaired in 72 hours at Pearl Harbor through a shipyard effort that should have taken weeks. The Hornet, newer, less experienced. And the Enterprise. She's the veteran. Her air group has more combat experience than any other carriers in the fleet. And she's carrying something the Japanese don't know about. The Americans have broken the Japanese naval code. They know Midway is the target. They know the timing. They know the approach route. The Japanese think they're springing a trap. They're walking into one. The morning of June 4th, 1942, Enterprise scout planes locate the Japanese carrier force. The strike order goes out. What follows is 4 hours that will reshape the Pacific War. The first wave is a disaster. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet attacks without fighter cover. 15 planes. Every single one is shot down. 1 survivor out of 30 men. Torpedo Squadron 6 from the Enterprise attacks next. 14 planes. 10 are destroyed. The torpedoes that do launch either miss or malfunction. Imagine being in one of those planes. You're flying at 120 knots, barely above the wave tops, pointed directly at a carrier that's throwing everything it has at you. The Zero fighters are above you, behind you, beside you. Your torpedo bomber is slow, unarmored, and you can't take evasive action because you have to hold a steady course to drop. You watch the planes on either side of you get hit, catch fire, cartwheel into the sea. And your torpedo probably won't work even if you survive long enough to release it. But those torpedo bombers do something their pilots will never know about. They pull the Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level. Every Zero chasing torpedo bombers at 200 feet is a Zero that isn't at 15,000 feet. And at 10:22 a.m., the Enterprise's dive bombers arrive at 15,000 feet. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey leads 32 SBD Dauntless dive bombers down through a gap in the clouds. They find the Japanese carriers below them, flight decks packed with armed and fueled aircraft being readied for a strike. Bombs stacked, fuel lines charged. The worst possible moment to take a hit. McCluskey's bombers put themselves into near vertical dives. They scream down at over 200 miles per hour, releasing their bombs at dangerously low altitudes to maximize accuracy. Within 6 minutes, the Akagi, the Kaga, and the Soryu are burning. 3 carriers, 6 minutes. The Hiryu survives long enough to launch a counterstrike that cripples the Yorktown. But Enterprise dive bombers find the Hiryu that afternoon and finish her too. 4 Japanese fleet carriers sunk in a single day. The most experienced carrier air groups in the world destroyed. The pilots who hit Pearl Harbor, who swept through the Indian Ocean, who seemed invincible, gone. Midway doesn't just turn the tide of the Pacific War, it breaks the instrument Japan used to wage it. They'll build new carriers. They'll never replace those pilots. And the Enterprise, the ship the battleship admirals didn't think could fight a real war, just delivered the most decisive naval victory since Trafalgar. But the Pacific War doesn't pause for celebrations. 2 months after Midway, the Enterprise is in the Solomon Islands, covering the marine landings at Guadalcanal, and the Japanese want revenge. August 24th, 1942, the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. Japanese carriers launch a full strike against the American fleet, and the Enterprise is the primary target. The first wave comes in at 4:44 p.m. Dive bombers. The Enterprise's fighters and anti-aircraft guns tear into them, but this time there are too many, coming from too many angles. You can't get them all. The first bomb hits the flight deck near the aft elevator. It punches through the wooden planking, detonates inside the ship. A second bomb hits moments later, 30 feet from the first, blowing a 10-foot hole in the deck and starting fires below. A third bomb strikes near the number 1 elevator. The blast kills 35 men in the compartments below. The Enterprise is burning. The flight deck is torn open in 3 places. The number 1 elevator is jammed. Smoke is pouring out of the hull. Below decks, repair crews are fighting fires in spaces so hot the paint on the bulkheads is bubbling. And then something happens that defines this ship. A damage control officer named Lieutenant Commander Herschel Smith organizes his teams while the attack is still ongoing. They're patching holes, fighting fires, shoring up weakened structures, and they're doing it with bombs still falling around them. Within an hour, the Enterprise can recover aircraft again. Not fully repaired, not safe, but functional. She limps back to Pearl Harbor for repairs. The Japanese report her sunk. Radio Tokyo announces the destruction of an American carrier in the Eastern Solomons. Death number 1. Except the Enterprise is sitting in a dry dock in Pearl Harbor getting patched back together. Her crew is exhausted, her hull is scarred, and she's heading back out. This is where we came in. October 26, 1942, the Battle of Santa Cruz. The Japanese throw everything they have at the American carriers near Guadalcanal. The Hornet takes catastrophic damage. She'll be abandoned and scuttled. The Enterprise, once again, takes the brunt. 2 bombs hit her. A kamikaze-style diving plane crashes near the bow. The forward elevator is jammed. The flight deck is wrecked again. Fires burn below decks. And once again, the damage control teams, many of them the same men who patched her at Eastern Solomons, go to work. They're fighting fires with the ship still under attack. They're welding steel plates over holes in the flight deck while the ship maneuvers at high speed to dodge torpedoes. Here's what makes this moment critical. The Hornet is gone. The Saratoga is in dry dock after a torpedo hit. The Wasp was sunk a month earlier by a Japanese submarine. The Enterprise is now the only operational American carrier in the entire Pacific Ocean. Think about that. From Pearl Harbor to the coast of Australia, from the Aleutian Islands to the South Pacific, every square mile of ocean the United States needs to contest, every island the Marines are fighting to hold, every convoy that needs air cover, it all depends on one ship. One damaged, patched together, twice bombed aircraft carrier. Radio Tokyo announces Enterprise sunk for the second time. Japanese intelligence updates its assessment. The American carrier threat in the South Pacific has been eliminated. Death number 2. But the Gray Ghost isn't done. Her crew paints a message on a banner and hangs it from the ship. Enterprise versus Japan. It's not entirely a joke. For weeks, it's close to literally true. She covers the reinforcement of Guadalcanal. She provides air cover for operations that have no other source of air cover. She does the work of an entire carrier fleet with a patched flight deck and a crew that hasn't had a proper rest in months. She holds the line alone until the Saratoga returns and the new Essex-class carriers begin arriving in 1943. If the Enterprise had actually gone down at Santa Cruz, if the Japanese reports had been accurate instead of wishful, the entire American position in the South Pacific might have collapsed before reinforcements arrived. By 1943, the war is changing. The Essex-class carriers are arriving, bigger, tougher, newer ships built specifically for the kind of war the Enterprise has been fighting since day one. The fleet is growing. The Enterprise is no longer alone, but she doesn't get pulled off the line. She keeps fighting. She's at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, where American fighters destroy over 300 Japanese aircraft in a single day. She's part of the fast carrier task force that's now roaming the Pacific with a power the Japanese can't match. And then, in the spring of 1945, she faces something entirely new. Okinawa, the last major island campaign before the planned invasion of Japan. The Japanese have abandoned conventional naval strategy. They can't match the American fleet ship for ship anymore. So they've adopted a weapon designed to bypass every advantage in armor, firepower, and training. Kamikazes. Suicide aircraft. Pilots who aren't trying to drop a bomb and fly home. Pilots who are the bomb. They aim themselves at the ship and fly straight in. No evasion after release, no recovery. The plane, the bomb, and the pilot all hit the target as one unit. You can shoot down a dive bomber on its approach and the bomb falls harmlessly. You can damage a torpedo bomber and force it to drop early. But a kamikaze doesn't need to release anything. A damaged kamikaze is still a guided missile. You have to destroy it completely. Break it apart in the air, or it's still coming. May 14th, 1945. A kamikaze hits the Enterprise. The plane strikes the forward elevator. The bomb it's carrying punches through the flight deck and detonates inside the ship. The blast is so powerful, it throws the entire forward elevator, a platform weighing thousands of pounds, 400 feet into the air. Crew members on other ships watch it tumble upward and crash back down onto the flight deck. The fires are severe. The structural damage is the worst the Enterprise has ever sustained. For the first time in the war, the damage is beyond what the crew can patch at sea. She has to withdraw to Puget Sound Navy Yard for major repairs. Radio Tokyo announces it for the third time. The Enterprise has been sunk. Death number 3. She's still afloat. She's still there. Burned, buckled, missing an elevator, but there. The gray ghost refuses to go down. She's still in the repair yard when the atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ends before she can return to the fight. After nearly 4 years of continuous combat, Pearl Harbor to Okinawa, Midway to the Philippine Sea, the most decorated ship in Navy history finally stops fighting. Not because the enemy sank her, because the enemy surrendered. 20 battle stars, more than any other U.S. Navy ship in World War II, present or engaged in nearly every major naval action in the Pacific. She launched the planes that sank Japanese carriers at Midway. She held the line alone at Guadalcanal. She survived 3 confirmed sinkings that existed only in Japanese reports and Radio Tokyo broadcasts. Her crew served aboard a ship the enemy was certain they'd already destroyed. 3 times they sailed out on a dead ship. 3 times they fought on a ghost. And then the war ends. And something happens that's harder to explain than any battle. The Navy decommissions the Enterprise on February 17, 1947. That part makes sense. The war is over, the fleet is downsizing. But then the question becomes, what do you do with a ship like this? There are efforts to save her. Campaigns to turn the Enterprise into a museum ship, a permanent memorial to the men who served aboard her in the war she helped win. The Navy considers it. The public supports it. Former crew members organize and fundraise. It's not enough. In 1958, the Enterprise is sold for scrap. The most decorated warship in United States Navy history is broken apart at a shipyard in Kearney, New Jersey. Her steel is melted down. Her flight deck, the same flight deck that was bombed, patched, bombed again, patched again, hit by a kamikaze, and repaired one more time, is cut into pieces and hauled away. The Japanese spent 4 years trying to sink the Enterprise. They hit her with bombs. They hit her with kamikazes. They reported her dead 3 times. And every time, she came back. She survived everything the enemy threw at her. She didn't survive peace. There's something in that worth sitting with. The things we fight hardest to protect during a crisis are often the first things we discard when the crisis passes. Not because they failed, because we stop seeing what they represent once the danger is gone. The Navy named a new carrier, Enterprise, CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. And when CVN-65 was decommissioned, they designated another, CVN-80, currently under construction. The name lives on. But there was only one gray ghost. and she earned that name the hard way. Not by being the biggest, not by being the newest, not by being the most advanced ship in the fleet. She earned it by being the one that kept coming back every single time when she wasn't supposed to. Some ships are built to be unsinkable. The Enterprise was sunk 3 times. She just didn't stay down.